For 30 years, I was the shadow that made Raymond Cole look brilliant. I swept the sawdust from his first workshop, balanced his chaotic books, and lived on a strict allowance while he built an empire of luxury. Now, I am treated like an embarrassing domestic servant, forced to watch him share my life's work with a younger woman. They think I am too broken to fight, too penniless to leave. They don't know I've been writing a different ledger. If you have ever been discarded by the person you built, please subscribe, like, and comment. I need to know what happened. When a man strips his wife of her dignity, how much of his own empire has he left unguarded? The smell of cedar wood and expensive tobacco always enters the room 5 seconds before Raymond does. It is a heavy, theatrical scent, designed to mask the odor of sweat and grease that used to cling to him when we were 25 and living in a rented house with drafty floorboards. I stand at the stove, stirring the steel pot of oatmeal. The kitchen is large, cold, and white, remodeled 3 years ago to Victoria's specifications. Or rather, to the specifications of the design firm Raymond co-runs with Sienna Brooks. I had no say in the quartz countertops or the handleless cabinets that require a specific, delicate push to open. "Maggie, is the French press ready?" Raymond asks, his voice booming from the threshold. He is 55, his silver hair perfectly sculpted, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that conceals the slight thickening of his waist. "It's almost done, Raymond," I say, not turning around. My hands are red from the cold water. The kitchen heater has been rattling since November, but Raymond said the repairman's estimate was extortionate and told me to wear a sweater. "I don't have time for almost," he mutters, tapping his fingers against the pristine quartz. "I have a 10 o'clock walkthrough at the lakefront property with Sienna and the architect. Just pour whatever is there." I press the filter down. The glass beaker is warm, the only heat in the room. I pour his coffee into the heavy ceramic travel mug he likes, the one with the Cole & Co. Bespoke Interiors logo embossed in gold leaf. "Your dry cleaning is in the hall closet," I say, setting the mug near his leather briefcase. "And I found these in your gray jacket." I slide a small stack of receipts across the island. Most are for lumber shipments and high-end brass hardware, but the top one is a small pink slip from the Gilded Lily, a boutique hotel 90 miles north of the city. The date is from last Thursday, a night Raymond told me he was sleeping at the warehouse to supervise a late-night delivery. Raymond's eyes flick to the pink paper. His face doesn't flush. He has spent 20 years perfecting his executive calm. He merely picks up the receipt, folds it in half, and slides it into his breast pocket. "A client dinner," he says, his voice flat, devoid of any defensive edge. "Sienna's contact. We're pitching the hotel's lobby redesign. I've told you, Maggie, these high-end accounts require cultivation." "In a boutique room with a fireplace?" I ask, my voice quiet, matching the rhythm of the bubbling oatmeal. Raymond lets out a short, dry laugh, the one he uses when I ask about the company accounts. "You've been out of the industry too long, Maggie. You don't understand how business is done at this level. If we don't project success, we don't get the contracts. Now, did you finish entering the raw material invoices into the system?" "I did," I say. "Good. Don't forget the municipal tax filings are due by 5. Becca will be by later to pick up the signed hard copies." He grabs his briefcase and his gold-embossed mug, already looking at his phone. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up." He doesn't kiss my cheek. He hasn't in 4 years. The front door clicks shut, followed by the low, expensive purr of his German SUV reversing down the driveway. I sit at the island, alone in the cold kitchen. I do not eat the oatmeal. Instead, I pull out my worn pocket calendar. Under today's date, I write, "The Gilded Lily, room 204, $412.50. By noon, the rain has turned the backyard into a gray bog. I drive my 10-year-old station wagon to the Cole and Company showroom downtown. It is located in the historic district, behind a facade of restored brick and leaded glass. When I walk in, the brass bell above the door chiming softly, the warmth of the showroom hits me like a physical wall. The scent of expensive jasmine diffuses through the air. Sienna Brooks is standing near a mahogany dining table, holding a color wheel against a swatch of Belgian linen. She is 36, tall, and moves with the effortless grace of someone who has never had to scrub a grout line. Her laugh is like glass breaking, light, musical, and completely cold. "Oh, Maggie, hi!" our daughter, Becca, says, stepping out from the glass-walled office. She is 24, her hair styled exactly like Sienna's, wearing a silk blouse I know she couldn't afford on her junior designer salary. She looks at my damp raincoat and my worn leather boots with a familiar, pinching disappointment. "You could have just left the tax files in the Dropbox outside. We're in the middle of a client consult." "The auditor required my original signature as the corporate secretary, Becca," I say, holding out the manila envelope. "I needed to sign them in front of Raymond." "Raymond is busy, Maggie," Sienna says, turning from the table. Her smile is perfect, polite, and thoroughly hollow. "We're finalizing the autumn catalog layout. I'm sure Becca can take the papers to him later. We wouldn't want to drag you into the back office while you're damp." She looks at my shoes, then at the faded canvas tote bag I carry. "Of course," I say. I look past Sienna, through the glass wall of Raymond's private office. He is sitting at his desk, his sleeves rolled up, laughing at something on his computer screen. On his desk sits a silver, monogrammed coffee pot, the one he bought for the showroom, while the heater in our kitchen remains broken. He looks up, his eyes meeting mine through the glass. He doesn't wave. He doesn't smile. He merely nods, a curt, professional acknowledgement, before turning back to his screen. I hand the manila envelope to Becca. "Make sure he signs the third page, Becca. The corporate registration renewal depends on it." "I know how to do my job, Mom," Becca mutters, her voice laced with that sharp, defensive edge she inherited from her father. "You don't have to keep hovering." "I'm not hovering, dear," I say softly. "I'm just keeping the books." I turn and walk out of the showroom, the brass bell chiming my departure. When I get back to the house, I do not go to the kitchen. I walk down to the basement, down the narrow wooden stairs to the dark utility room behind the furnace. There is an old green metal filing cabinet here, covered in a thin layer of gray dust. This is where the records of Cole and Company from 1994 to 2002 are kept. The years when Raymond and I worked side by side in a garage that smelled of mineral spirits and cheap lacquer. I pull a small brass key from my collar, where it hangs on a silver chain beneath my sweater. I insert it into the rusted lock. It turns with a heavy, satisfying click. Inside, beneath 20 years of yellowed invoices, lies the original partnership agreement we signed on our kitchen table when we were 23. Raymond believes this document was destroyed in the office fire of 2008. He believes his current corporate structure is entirely separate from our early days. He has forgotten the second clause on page 4. The clause my father, a retired union clerk, insisted on inserting before he would loan us the $5,000 to buy Raymond's first table saw. I run my finger over the faded blue ink of Raymond's youthful, messy signature. They think I am the servant in this house, the invisible woman who washes their linen and stays out of the light. They do not know that the trap has been set for 30 years, and Raymond has just walked right into the center of it. The evening rain is heavy, drumming against the kitchen skylight with a relentless, hollow rhythm. I have made a simple roasted chicken with root vegetables. The steam rises from the platter, smelling of rosemary and salt, but the kitchen still feels cold. Raymond and Becca sit at the marble island, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of Raymond's tablet. They are discussing a new client, a prominent local surgeon who wants his entire suburban estate redesigned in what Sienna calls warm organic minimalism. "We're sourcing the white oak directly from a mill in Oregon," Becca says, her voice bright and animated. "Sienna says it's the only way to get the grain consistent enough for the floating stairs." "Sienna has an excellent eye for that kind of detail," Raymond agrees, not looking up from his screen. He slides a finger across the glass. "We'll charge a 20% sourcing fee on the lumber. It'll cover the shipping and leave a healthy margin." I set the platter down between them. "Raymond, the heating oil technician came today. He said the tank in the basement has a small leak in the outer seal. It needs to be replaced before the ground freezes." Raymond's fork stops. He looks at me with a cold, squinting, analytical gaze, the look he gives subcontractors when they try to charge him for extra materials. "A leak?" he says, his voice flat. "It's a double-walled tank, Maggie. It can wait." "He said it's a municipal code violation," I say, wiping my hands on my apron. "If it leaks into the soil, the cleanup could cost tens of thousands of dollars, not to mention the fines." "Everything is a code violation to those inspectors," Raymond sighs, dismissing the subject with a flick of his hand. "I'm not spending 10 grand on a tank that works perfectly fine. We have a capital call for the showroom extension next month. You need to stop looking for things to spend money on, Maggie. We have to keep our liquid cash high." He turns back to Becca, his face instantly softening. "Did you look at that leather jacket we saw in the window at Vincennes? The cognac one? I'll have Sienna put it on the corporate card under client development. You need to look the part if we're pitching the Mercer Group next week." Becca's eyes light up, her cheeks flushing with pleasure. "Really, Dad? Sienna said it would look amazing with the wide-leg linen trousers we ordered." I look at the roasted chicken. $10,000 for a safety hazard in the home we built is an extortionate waste. But a $2,000 leather jacket for our daughter to match her father's business partner is client development. I say nothing. I take my plate to the sink and begin to scrape the bones into the bin, the grease sticking to my fingers. The next morning, Raymond leaves his car keys on the granite counter. He took the delivery truck to the warehouse because they were moving a heavy cedar sideboard, and he asked me to take his SUV to the car wash down the road because it was dusty from the job site. I sit in the leather driver's seat of his car. It smells of his cedarwood cologne and another scent, a sharp green fragrance, like crushed mint leaves and expensive jasmine. Sienna's perfume. I open the glove compartment to find the registration card. Sitting on top of the manual is a thick, cream-colored envelope. I open it. It is an invitation to the Midwest Design Gala next month. Cole & Co. Bespoke Interiors is listed as a gold-level sponsor. Inside the envelope is the VIP seating chart. Table 4. Raymond Cole and Sienna Brooks. There is no mention of Margaret Cole. No mention of the co-founder. I am the woman who stays home in a drafty house, making sure that tax filings are signed so the corporate entity doesn't dissolve, while the mistress wears the cognac leather and drinks champagne in my place. At 3 in the afternoon, Becca comes by to pick up some laundry I did for her. She stands in the foyer, her boots dripping melted rain onto the white tile. She doesn't take her coat off. "Mom, did you wash my green wool sweater?" I need it for the gala committee meeting tonight. It's folded on your bed, Becca, I say, leaning against the doorframe. I used the gentle cycle and the lavender soap you like. She sighs, checking her watch. Thanks. Sienna says high-end wool can shrink if you aren't incredibly careful with the water temperature. I've been washing your wool since you were an infant, Becca, I say softly. I know how to handle the fabric. Becca looks uncomfortable for a split second. She shifts her weight, her eyes darting to her phone. I know, Mom. It's just, Sienna is very particular about the presentation. We're representing some major developers now. Everything has to look perfect. She looks at me, her eyes lingering on my faded wool cardigan and my unstyled hair. You should really get some new clothes, Mom. Dad would probably let you use the account at the boutique if you just asked him. You look so tired. I am tired, Becca, I say. She doesn't ask why. She doesn't want to know. It is easier for her to believe I am simply old and sluggish than to admit her father is draining my life to fund her lifestyle. She grabs her sweater and leaves, the front door clicking shut with a cold, solid finality. After she leaves, I go down to my small sewing room off the kitchen. I open my laptop and log into the accounting software. Raymond thinks my bookkeeping is merely clerical, that I just enter numbers into boxes without understanding what they mean. He doesn't know that I still have administrator access to the primary banking portal, a privilege established in 1995 when we were still using a local credit union and needed both signatures for every transaction. I look at the ledger. I see the monthly payments to S. Brooks Design, but I also see something else, a recurring transfer of $25,000 to a personal account under the name Larchmont Holdings. I pull out the old 1994 partnership agreement from my apron pocket. I look at page 4, clause 2. In the event of any unauthorized diversion of joint partnership assets to third-party entities without the written, notarized consent of both founding partners, the non-breaching partner shall have the immediate right to freeze all corporate operational accounts and assume sole administrative control of the primary line of credit. Raymond has been transferring money to Larchmont Holdings for 18 months. He thinks he is quietly hiding his personal wealth from a future divorce settlement, building a nest egg with Sienna. He doesn't know that every dollar he transfers is a knot he is tying around his own neck, and I have just found the rope. Raymond leaves his black leather wallet on the kitchen island at 6 in the evening. He is already at the showroom, preparing for the Meet the Designers cocktail hour, an exclusive event for their wealthiest residential clients. He calls me from his car, his voice hurried and vibrating with that familiar, self-important tension. Maggie, I left my card holder on the counter. I need my corporate ID and the purchasing card for the catering invoice. Bring it down to the showroom. Just leave it with the receptionist at the front desk. I'm in the middle of a walkthrough. I'll bring it, Raymond, I say to the empty kitchen. I drive down in the rain, the windshield wipers of my old station wagon squeaking rhythmically against the glass. The downtown historic district is glowing with warm amber light, the restored brick facades looking slick and expensive in the wet dark. Through the leaded glass windows of Cole & Co., I can see people holding thin crystal stemware, their laughter spilling out onto the wet sidewalk every time the heavy oak door opens. I step inside. The scent of expensive jasmine, wood smoke, and wet wool washes over me. No one looks at my faded rain jacket or my sensible flat shoes. The guests are dressed in cashmere and structured silk, moving through the staged living rooms like actors in a play. I find Raymond standing near a velvet sectional, talking to a couple in tailored coats. Sienna is beside him, her hand lightly resting near his elbow, her fingers sliding along his sleeve in a way that suggests quiet ownership. Becca is there too, laughing at a joke made by the couple's adult son. As I approach, I hear the husband client say, "You two have built an extraordinary brand here. The synergy between the architecture and the interiors is flawless." Raymond smiles, his shoulder brushing Sienna's as he nods. Well, Sienna is the soul of the aesthetic. I just cut the wood. She's the one who makes it beautiful. The better half, the client's wife coos, smiling at Sienna. Sienna doesn't correct her. She merely tilts her head, her eyes locking onto Raymond's with a soft, intimate understanding that makes my stomach tighten. Then Raymond sees me. The easy, charismatic smile instantly vanishes from his face, replaced by a rigid, tight mask of irritation. He steps away from the clients, intercepting me before I can get within 10 feet of the group. "I told you to leave it at the desk, Maggie," he whispers, his voice sharp and low. He snatches the wallet from my hand, his fingers brushing mine with a cold, dry haste. "The receptionist wasn't at her desk, Raymond," I say quietly. Sienna glides over, her green silk dress rustling like dry leaves. "Oh, Maggie! Thank you for bringing that. We'd invite you to stay for a glass of champagne, but it's mostly just industry partners tonight. Lots of dry, boring talk about global supply chains. You'd be bored to tears." She reaches onto a passing waiter's silver tray, picking up a small, delicate pastry and offering it to me with a tight, patronizing smile. "Here, take some of these on your way out. The fig and goat cheese ones are absolutely divine. A little treat for your drive back." I look at her hand. I look at Becca, who has turned her back to us, suddenly very interested in a swatch of boucle fabric, pretending she hasn't seen her mother standing there in a wet coat. "No, thank you, Sienna," I say, my voice steady, my eyes locked on hers. "I have to get back to the house. The kitchen is very cold." Raymond doesn't offer to help with the heater. He doesn't look at me as he slides his wallet into his breast pocket. "Drive carefully, Maggie. The roads are slick." I turn and walk out, the brass bell above the door chiming my exit. The cold rain on my face is a relief after the suffocating warmth of the showroom. I drive home in the dark. The silence of the station wagon is a comfort. When I get back to the house, I do not make tea. I do not turn on the television. I sit in my small sewing room and dial a number I have kept in a paper address book since 1994. It rings 3 times before a slow, gravelly voice answers. "Maggie, is that you?" "Hello, Gordon," I say, tracing the edge of the brass key on my necklace. "I hope I didn't wake you." Gordon Drake is 72 now. A retired corporate attorney who used to handle the union contracts for my father's construction crew. He is the only person alive who understands the legal weight of the original partnership agreement Raymond and I signed. "I've been waiting for your call, Maggie," Gordon says, the sound of paper rustling on his end. "I finished reviewing the Larchmont Holdings filing you sent over. It's exactly as you suspected. Raymond used the coaling company commercial line of credit as collateral to buy a luxury condominium on the Gold Coast. The deed is in the name of Larchmont, but the occupancy permit lists Sienna Brooks as the sole resident. And he signed the loan documents as the sole owner of Coal & Co.? I ask. "He did," Gordon says, his voice dropping into a grave, professional register. "Which is a direct, material breach of your 1994 partnership terms. Since you never signed the corporate consent waiver, that loan is legally fraudulent. The bank has the right to call the entire commercial line of credit immediately if they discover the conflict." "What happens to Coal & Company if that line of credit is called, Gordon?" "They collapse, Maggie," he says simply. "They have $85,000 in outstanding lumber invoices due to the Oregon mill next week. Without that line of credit, they can't pay their suppliers. The showroom, the warehouse, it all goes under. But Maggie, you have to understand. If the company goes down, you lose your share too. You'll be left with nothing." I look at the faded, water-stained wallpaper of my sewing room. I look at my hands, rough and calloused from decades of quiet, unacknowledged labor. "I've had nothing for 30 years, Gordon," I say, my voice steady and cold. "But Raymond has never had to sleep in a freezing house. It's time he learned how." The rain has finally stopped, leaving a cold, heavy fog that clings to the pine trees outside our kitchen window. Raymond is downstairs at 7, his leather weekend duffel bag already sitting by the front door. He is humming a low, repetitive jazz tune, the same one the quartet was playing at the showroom gala last night. He is dressed in a soft, cream-colored cashmere sweater I have never seen before, likely bought during one of his client development trips to Chicago. "We're leaving for the Upstate project at 8, he says, pouring orange juice straight from the carton. He doesn't look at me. "The Mercer Lodge. We need to select the fieldstone for the 3 hearths and approve the timber framing. I'll be back late Sunday." I set a plate of dry toast down on the marble island. "This is the first I'm hearing of a 3-day trip, Raymond." He stops, the carton halfway to his mouth. He lets out a small, patronizing sigh, the kind of sound a teacher makes when a slow student asks a redundant question. "I told you about this last week, Maggie. You just don't listen. Your mind is always drifting lately. I can't keep repeating myself." Becca walks into the kitchen, her long wool coat already buttoned, carrying her laptop bag. She doesn't have her luggage. Raymond must have loaded it into his SUV last night while I was washing the dinner dishes. "Sienna is waiting in the driveway, Dad," she says, checking her reflection in the polished microwave door. "She wants to beat the bridge traffic before the morning rush." She turns to me, her expression neutral, almost bored. "Bye, Mom. Don't forget to water my ferns while I'm gone. The soil in those terracotta pots dries out so fast. They need to stay damp." They don't ask if I have plans for the weekend. They don't ask if I'll be lonely in this massive, drafty house while the heating oil tank slowly leaks in the basement. They treat me like a building manager, someone who exists solely to maintain the property and water the plants while they live their lives elsewhere. "I'll water them, Becca," I say softly. Before he leaves, Raymond runs back upstairs to get his heavy overcoat from the master closet. He has left his garment bag zipped on our bed. I walk into the bedroom. The scent of his cedarwood cologne hangs heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. I reach out to adjust the hanger of his spare suit. As I move the fabric, a small piece of glossy paper slips from the zippered pocket of the garment bag and flutters onto the carpet. I pick it up. It is an invoice from Julian's Fine Jewelers, dated 2 days ago. Description: 18-carat white gold diamond tennis bracelet, 4.2 carats. Price: $14,500. Payment method: Cole & Co. Capital Reserve Account. I stared at the numbers. On Tuesday, Raymond had stood in our cold kitchen and told me we couldn't afford to spend $10,000 to replace a leaking fuel tank because cash flow was too tight. But 48 hours later, he had authorized a $14,000 withdrawal from the company's capital reserve, the emergency fund we set aside for tax liabilities and employee health care, to buy a diamond bracelet. My own wrists are bare, the skin dry and red from dish soap and cold water. The bracelet is already on Sienna's wrist. I know this with the absolute, quiet certainty of a woman who has spent 30 years watching a man slip away. I slide the glossy receipt into my apron pocket as Raymond walks back into the bedroom, his heavy coat slung over his arm. "Everything set?" he asks, his eyes sweeping past me to his bag, completely ignoring my face. "Yes, Raymond," I say, my hand resting on the paper in my pocket. Everything is set. Good. See you Sunday. He grabs the garment bag and the duffel, his heavy footsteps fading down the stairs. A moment later, the front door clicks shut, and the roar of his SUV echoes in the driveway before fading into the morning fog. The house is empty by 8:15. The silence is thick, settling into the corners of the rooms like dust. I walk into Raymond's private study on the first floor. The door is usually kept locked, but in his haste to beat the traffic, he left the small brass key sitting in the half-open drawer of his desk. I sit in his high-backed leather chair. The mahogany desk is clean, polished to a mirror finish, reflecting the gray sky outside the window. On it sits his secondary laptop, the one he uses for his personal investments, the one our daughter and Sienna believe is strictly for corporate development. I open the lid. The password is Becca's birthday. He hasn't changed it in 10 years, a small detail of domestic habit he never thought to update. I navigate to the portal for Larchmont Holdings. I scroll through the pending transactions. There is a wire transfer scheduled for next Friday, November 18th. The final closing costs for the luxury condominium on the Gold Coast. Next Friday is also the day the corporate accountants are scheduled to perform the annual fiscal audit for Cole & Co. Raymond is planning to close on the condo, transfer the final capital out of our reserves, and have his accountants approve the books before the new fiscal year begins. He thinks he is running a clean race. I pull a sheet of official Cole & Company letterhead from his desk drawer. I slide it into the typewriter I keep in my sewing room, the mechanical keys striking the paper with a sharp, satisfying clack. To the Commercial Lending Department, First National Bank. As co-founder and 50% shareholder of Cole & Co., I hereby notify you of an unauthorized loan application and collateral pledge made using the company's commercial line of credit, without corporate resolution or secondary signature. I sign my name at the bottom in the precise, elegant cursive I used to teach Becca when she was a child. I do not mail the letter today. Next Friday is 7 days away. I want Raymond to get all the way to the edge of his new life. I want him to stand on the terrace of that luxury condominium, looking out at the water with Sienna, before he realizes the floor beneath him has already been cut away. By Saturday morning, the smell of raw heating oil has seeped through the floorboards into our kitchen. It is a thick, chemical stench that catches in the back of my throat, dry and toxic. I carry a flashlight down the narrow wooden stairs to the basement. In the shadows behind the water heater, a dark, iridescent puddle of red-dyed oil has pooled on the concrete beneath the old steel tank. It is weeping slowly from a rusted seam near the bottom. I do not call the emergency service line Raymond uses for the showroom. Instead, I call Silas Thorne. He is 62, a working-class furnace technician who spent 30 years working alongside my father on local construction sites. His hands are permanently stained with grease, his knuckles scarred from decades of heavy pipework. He arrives 40 minutes later in a rusted white van that smells of plumbing flux and copper. He stands in our damp basement, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom as he examines the seam. "This is the original tank from '94, Maggie," Silas says, wiping his brow with a greasy rag. He shakes his head, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "The steel is paper thin. If this seam blows, you'll have 250 gallons of oil soaking into your foundations. The state will condemn the dirt beneath your house." He looks up at the ceiling, where the newly installed subflooring for Raymond's white quartz kitchen is visible between the joists. "I saw the new showroom Raymond built downtown," Silas mutters, his eyes narrowing. "Fancy glass, imported leather chairs, Italian light fixtures. But he leaves you sleeping over a ticking bomb? Your dad would have had his skin for this, Maggie. Raymond has different priorities now, Silas, I say quietly, my voice echoing in the cold space. He's a fool, Silas says, reaching into his toolbox for a temporary epoxy patch. I can seal this to buy you a few days, but it's a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. You need a new tank, Maggie. Monday morning, before the cold snap hits. Thank you, Silas, I say. Just buy me until Friday. After Silas leaves, I dial Raymond's cell phone. It rings until it goes to voicemail. I leave a brief, calm message explaining the severity of the leak and Silas's mourning. 10 minutes later, my phone rings. It isn't Raymond. It is Becca. Mom, why are you harassing Dad? Her voice is sharp, vibrating with background static, the sound of wind through pines and a woman's distant musical laughter. We're in the middle of a site layout with the Mercers. Sienna had to mute her iPad presentation because Dad's phone was buzzing on the cedar table. The oil tank is leaking onto the basement floor, Becca, I say, my voice steady. Silas Thorne says it's a severe hazard. Silas Thorne is 70 years old, Mom. He's probably just trying to scare you into a $10,000 job. Becca sighs, her tone dripping with the dismissive, polished arrogance she has copied from Sienna. Sienna says those old steel tanks weep all the time. It's just condensation and minor runoff. Just put a plastic bucket under it. We'll look at it when we get back Sunday night. Don't call again unless the house is actually on fire. She hangs up before I can respond. I look at the silent receiver in my hand. Sienna says, my 24-year-old daughter has traded 30 years of her mother's care for the glossy, aesthetic opinions of a woman who has been in her life for less than 2 years. The exclusion is no longer subtle. It is a physical wall. I am officially a nuisance to my own family, an old woman crying wolf in a drafty house. I do not put a bucket under the tank. I let the red-dyed oil weep slowly onto the concrete. I go back to my sewing room and pull out the paper folders of the company's monthly credit card statements. Raymond believes I only look at the digital summaries on the dashboard, but I still receive the physical paper statements in the mail, a detail he forgot to route to the showroom office. I turn to the section labeled Marketing, Client Development. October 14th, Neiman Marcus, $3,200, a designer coat for Sienna. October 22nd, The Spa at the Peninsula, $1,800, a weekend retreat. November 2nd, Elite Floral Designs, $950, arrangements delivered to Sienna's private apartment. Every single charge has been categorized as a legitimate business expense, signed off by Raymond, and approved under Sienna's designer consulting agreement. I scan the documents, save them to a secure PDF file on my personal thumb drive, and place the physical paper copies in a folder labeled Audit Prep, Confidential. Then, I call Gordon. The letter is typed and signed, Gordon, I say, looking out the window at the gray fog rolling over the wet lawn. I have the private courier scheduled for Thursday morning, Maggie, Gordon says, his voice slow and deliberate. The bank will receive your formal dispute at 9:30. By 10 o'clock, they will initiate an administrative freeze on the commercial line of credit. If Raymond tries to use the corporate card for his upstate hotel checkout on Friday morning, or the wire transfer for the Gold Coast condo closing at noon, the transactions will be declined. Good, I say. He will know it was you, Maggie. The bank's legal department is required to disclose the partner dispute to him immediately. I want him to know, Gordon, I say, my fingers tracing the brass key around my neck. I want him to see my signature on the document that stops his world. They return late Sunday night. The high-beam headlights of Raymond's SUV sweep across my bedroom ceiling, throwing long, skeletal shadows of the pine trees against the walls before the garage door rumbles open. When they walk into the kitchen, the smell of raw heating oil hits them like a physical wall. It has grown stronger over the weekend, a heavy, suffocating cloud that hangs in the warm air of the house, sticking to the furniture and the curtains. "Jesus, Maggie," Raymond snaps, dropping his leather duffel bag onto the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. He coughs, his face twisting in disgust. "What did I tell you? It smells like a refinery in here. Why didn't you put the plastic bucket under the valve like Becca said?" "It's not leaking from the valve, Raymond," I say, standing in the doorway of the dark dining room. "It's weeping from the rusted bottom of the tank. Silas Thorne patched it, but he said the steel is paper thin. It's barely holding." "You should have called a real plumbing service," Becca says, her voice tired and sharp with irritation as she drags her rolling suitcase toward the stairs. "A professional. Silas Thorne is practically prehistoric. He probably used cheap wood glue. All my clean laundry upstairs is going to smell like diesel now." They don't ask if I have been breathing this air for 3 days. They don't ask if my head is throbbing from the fumes. They only care about the immediate inconvenience to their senses, treating my survival in this house as a personal failure of my domestic duties. The front door opens again, and Sienna walks in. She is carrying a leather portfolio of fabric swatches and a high-end designer bag. She dropped them off in the driveway, but she decided to come inside to check on Becca's ferns. "Oh, goodness," Sienna says, holding a silk handkerchief to her nose as she steps into the kitchen. She looks around the room with a delicate, practicing pity that makes my skin crawl. "Maggie, dear, you shouldn't be breathing this. At your age, toxic fumes can really affect your cognitive processing. Raymond, we need to get her into a hotel until this is sorted. Or perhaps a nice residential retirement community over in Westlake. A place where she won't have to manage these heavy maintenance issues." She reaches out to pat Becca's shoulder. As she moves her arm, her silk sleeve slides up her wrist. There it is. The 18-karat white gold diamond tennis bracelet. It catches the cold overhead light of our kitchen, glittering with a blinding, sterile brilliance. $14,500 of our company's emergency reserves, wrapped around the wrist of the woman, suggesting I have cognitive decline because my house is falling apart. "I am fine, Sienna," I say, my voice flat, my eyes locked on the cold sparkle of the diamonds. "Well, if you say so," Sienna says, her smile sweet and thoroughly hollow. "But really, Raymond, it's about quality of life. Maggie deserves a place where she doesn't have to worry about old heating systems." "We'll handle it, Sienna," Raymond says, his voice soft, his eyes lingering on her with an intimacy that completely excludes me from the room. "Thank you for looking out for her." Sienna leaves a few minutes later, her heavy jasmine perfume lingering in the air, a sickening mix with the stench of the heating oil. Becca goes upstairs to her room, leaving me alone with Raymond in the kitchen. He stands near the marble island, his hands on his hips, his jaw tight. "We're hosting the Mercer Group at the showroom on Thursday morning at 10, he says, his voice dropping into that low warning register he uses when he wants to intimidate a subcontractor. "They're bringing their lead investors from Chicago. I want you to stay away from the downtown office this week, Maggie. You've been looking unpolished lately. I don't want our prospective clients seeing the corporate secretary looking like a cleaning lady." "I have no reason to go to the showroom, Raymond," I say quietly. "Good," he says, grabbing his duffel bag. "Let's keep it that way. I'll have a junior technician look at the tank on Friday after the audit is finished. Just stay out of the basement." He walks upstairs, his heavy footsteps fading down the hallway. I stand in the quiet kitchen, the smell of oil rising around me. Thursday morning at 10. The Mercer Group is their biggest pitch of the year. If they secure the Mercer contract, it will double Cole & Co.'s valuation and fund the luxury showroom extension Raymond has been bragging about. Raymond is betting his entire future on Thursday morning. And at 9:30 that very morning, my private courier will walk into the commercial lending department of First National Bank with my signed dispute. I look down at my hands, dry and rough, the smell of the leaking oil deep in my skin. I can wait 4 days. By Wednesday, the domestic routine of our home has collapsed into a quiet, frozen state. Raymond and Becca eat their meals at different times, or they order takeout from the sushi bar downtown and leave the plastic containers on the kitchen island for me to throw away. I sit in my small sewing room, the door half closed, listening to the murmur of their voices drifting from the dining room. They are reviewing their digital presentation slides for the Mercer Group. "We'll show them the Oregon white oak samples first," Becca says, her voice sharp and professional, mimicking Sienna's precise, clipped cadence. "Then we'll transition to the Gold Coast penthouse renderings to show them our capability in luxury residential spaces." "The penthouse is the crown jewel," Raymond says, his voice thick with satisfaction. He doesn't mention that the penthouse was purchased with a fraudulent commercial loan. To him, it is already a monument to his own genius. They talk about the future of Cole & Company as if I have already been deleted from the corporate structure. I am merely the background hum of the house, like the refrigerator or the leaking furnace in the cellar. At 8 in the evening, Becca comes to my sewing room. She is holding a silk cream blouse, the one she bought to match her new cognac leather jacket. "Mom, can you steam this for me?" she asks, her eyes locked on her phone, her thumb flicking across the screen. The collar has a deep crease, and Sienna says a wrinkled collar makes you look like you don't care about the details of your own business. "Put it on the board, Becca," I say quietly. I heat the iron. The steam rises in a warm cloud, smelling of clean water and hot silk. As I press the collar, I look at our daughter's profile. She has my mother's delicate nose, but her eyes are cold, focused entirely on the glowing screen in her hand. I realize with a quiet, aching grief that this is the last time I will ever iron a shirt for my daughter. I am preparing her to stand beside her father and his mistress on the day their world collapses. She has chosen their expensive illusion over my quiet reality, and she will have to suffer the consequences of that choice. "It's done, Becca," I say, handing her the hanger. "Thanks, Mom," she says, her voice casual and distant as she takes the blouse. She doesn't notice the look in my eyes. She doesn't notice the silence that follows her out of the room. By 10 o'clock, the house is quiet, save for the sound of Raymond's laughter echoing from his first-floor study. He is drinking scotch. I can hear him through the heavy oak door, talking to Sienna on his cell phone. "The Mercer team is locked in, Sienna," he says, his voice thick with liquor and triumph. "We'll sign the letter of intent at 11. The wire transfer for the Gold Coast condo will clear at noon, and we'll be celebrating on the terrace by 3. It's all coming together." I stand in the dark hallway, my fingers wrapped around the cold brass key of my filing cabinet. I feel no anger. I feel only a deep, hollow exhaustion. I go back to my small bedroom, lock the door, and open my gray flip phone. I dial Gordon's number. "Is everything in place, Gordon?" I whisper. "The courier is confirmed, Maggie," Gordon says, his voice dry and steady. "The fraud notice and the partnership dispute documents will be delivered to the bank's compliance officer, Sarah Jenkins, at exactly 9:30 tomorrow morning. Sarah is bound by federal lending regulations. Even if Raymond's contact at the local branch tries to intervene, she is legally required to freeze the account immediately to protect the bank from liability. Thank you, Gordon, I say. Are you ready for what comes next, Maggie? Once the freeze is initiated, the showroom will lose its operational funds. The suppliers in Oregon will halt their shipments. The Mercer pitch will collapse in front of the investors when the corporate cards are declined at the catering checkout. I've been ready for 30 years, Gordon, I say softly. I close the phone and lay it on my nightstand, beside the stack of pink receipts from the Gilded Lily. Tomorrow morning, Raymond's dream will meet my reality, and only one of us will walk out of the room. Thursday morning begins with a freezing gray drizzle that coats the dry pine needles in the yard with a thin layer of ice. Raymond is downstairs by 7:30, pacing the kitchen floor like a caged animal. He looks pristine, his charcoal suit brushed, his silk tie knotted with mathematical precision, his leather shoes polished to a high shine. But his movements are jagged, his breathing shallow. Maggie, where is the physical checkbook for the Capital Reserve account? He demands, his voice rising above the hum of the refrigerator. I told Becca to put it in my briefcase last night, but she says it's not in the study. It's in my sewing room, Raymond, I say, pouring my coffee into a plain ceramic mug. In the locked drawer of my desk. I was reconciling the quarterly payroll tax withholdings yesterday. Get it, now, he snaps, his hand twitching against his thigh. The Mercer team is bringing their lead financial officer. If they want to see our liquid reserve verification, I need the hard copies. Why do you always lock things up when you know I'm in a rush? I do not argue. I walk to my sewing room, unlock the drawer with the brass key around my neck, and retrieve the blue leather checkbook. I hand it to him. He snatches it from my fingers without looking at my face, sliding it into his leather portfolio. Don't forget to water my ferns, Mom, Becca says, rushing past me to grab her coat from the hall closet. She looks beautiful in her cream silk blouse, her hair styled in soft waves. She doesn't look at my old cardigan. She doesn't see the woman standing in front of her. They leave at 8. They are running toward their future, completely unaware that the bridge has already been rigged. At 9:15, I put on my old yellow raincoat and drive my 10-year-old station wagon downtown. I park directly across the street from the Cole & Co. showroom, behind a large delivery van. The rain is smearing the windshield, but through the glass, the warm, amber glow of the showroom is perfectly visible. At 9:45, a sleek black luxury passenger van pulls up to the curb. The Mercer Group has arrived. 4 men and 2 women in expensive, dark-tailored wool coats step out onto the wet sidewalk. Raymond and Sienna are already at the heavy glass door to greet them. Sienna wears a tailored black dress, the white gold diamond tennis bracelet catching the light of the entryway with a blinding, sterile flash as she shakes hands. Becca stands just behind them, holding a silver tray of champagne flutes, her face glowing with pride. They smile. They laugh. They walk inside, the heavy door closing behind them, shutting out the cold drizzle. I sit in the quiet of my car. The engine is off, the dashboard clock ticking away the minutes. At 9:50, my flip phone vibrates in my lap. It is Gordon. The compliance department at First National has processed your fraud affidavit, Maggie, Gordon says, his voice carrying the dry, professional satisfaction of a retired lawyer who has executed a perfect strategy. The administrative freeze was initiated at exactly 9:42. All corporate accounts, the commercial line of credit, and the pending Larchmont wire transfers are officially locked. Thank you, Gordon, I say quietly. Through the large windows of the showroom across the street, I watch the meeting unfold. The Mercer team is gathered around the large mahogany dining table, looking at the Gold Coast penthouse renderings projected on a large screen. Raymond is gesturing with his hands, his face animated, spinning his web of luxury. Suddenly, Raymond's assistant, Clara, walks into the showroom. Her face is pale, almost gray. She is holding a portable phone, her movements hurried and awkward. She approaches the table and whispers something to Raymond. Raymond's easy, charismatic smile instantly vanishes. He excuses himself from the clients, stepping into his glass-walled private office. Through the glass, I watch him dial his phone. He is shouting now, his face turning a dark, furious red. He runs his hand through his perfectly sculpted hair, ruining the style, his composure completely fracturing. Sienna notices the shift. She excuses herself from the Mercer team with a tight, polite smile and walks quickly into his office, closing the glass door behind her. My phone vibrates again. The screen reads, Raymond. I do not answer. I let it ring, the low buzz vibrating against my palm. I open my business banking app. A red alert notification pops up on the screen. Alert. Wire transfer number 4082. $250,000 to Larchmont Holdings. Declined. Reason. Account frozen by administrative order. He was trying to move the money early. He was trying to drain the capital reserve before the annual audit on Friday to secure the Gold Coast penthouse before I could find out. Through the glass office window across the street, I watch Raymond slam his fist against his mahogany desk, sending his gold-embossed coffee mug clattering to the floor. He looks at his phone, then at Sienna, his chest heaving under his bespoke suit. He is realizing, second by second, that the invisible woman who washed his shirts, stayed in the cold house, and balanced his books for 30 years, has just turned off his air. From my station wagon across the street, I watch the silent, devastating collapse of Raymond's world. Inside the glass-walled office, his frantic gestures are wild and desperate, his mouth moving in mute, furious screams. Sienna stands beside his desk, her pale hand hovering near her mouth, her eyes wide with a sudden freezing panic. In the main showroom, the Mercer investors are looking at one another. The lead financial officer has his tablet open, his fingers flying across the screen. A frozen commercial line of credit for a boutique design firm is a terminal diagnosis. It takes less than 5 minutes for a sophisticated investor to realize the company they are about to partner with is legally radioactive. One by one, the investors stand. They do not wait for Raymond to finish his call. They do not look at the renderings on the screen. They put on their dark, expensive wool coats. Our daughter, Becca, tries to stop them. I can see the panic on her face as she gestures toward the champagne tray, her lips moving in frantic, desperate apologies. The lead investor politely waves her off, shakes her hand with a cold, professional pity, and walks out. The others follow him into the freezing drizzle, climb back into their black, luxury van, and drive away. The Mercer contract, the deal that was supposed to double the company's valuation and secure Raymond's future, is gone in a matter of minutes. I turn the key in my ignition, shift into drive, and make my way back to the house. The kitchen is still cold, the heavy chemical stench of the leaking heating oil hanging thick in the air. I sit at the marble island, waiting. I have placed the black leather folder on the white quartz countertop, directly in the center of the clean surface. 10 minutes later, the gravel driveway roars. The door of Raymond's SUV slams with a violence that rattles the kitchen window panes. The front door flies open, and Raymond bursts into the kitchen, his face a dark, dangerous purple, his silk tie loosened and askew. Becca follows him, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her cream silk blouse crumpled. Sienna enters last, her jaw set in a hard, rigid line, her eyes as cold as flint. "What did you do?" Raymond screams, slamming his leather portfolio onto the island, missing my mug by inches. "What did you tell the bank? They've frozen every corporate account we have. The Mercer deal is dead. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" I do not flinch. I do not raise my voice. I take a slow, quiet sip of my lukewarm coffee. "I notified them of the Larchmont Holdings wire transfers, Raymond," I say, my voice level, slicing through his rage. "And the unauthorized use of Cole & Co.'s commercial line of credit to secure Sienna's luxury condominium." "You're insane," Raymond hisses, stepping closer, his hands balled into white-knuckled fists. "You're a partner in name only. We signed the restructuring in 2008. You gave up administrative control of the primary accounts when we transitioned the firm to an LLC." I open the black leather folder. I slide the original 1994 partnership agreement across the polished quartz. The LLC transition in 2008 required a signed marital consent waiver because the original 94 firm was funded by my father's personal capital, I say, my fingers resting on the yellowed paper. "I never signed that waiver, Raymond." Raymond stares at me, his eyes widening, a flicker of raw, ugly realization crossing his face. "We have the signed document on file in the safe. My corporate lawyer had it notarized." "Your lawyer notarized a copy that you signed on my behalf," I say softly. "Your signature is on the witness line, and the notary of record was Sienna's brother-in-law. It's forgery, Raymond. Gordon Drake filed the formal challenge with the state licensing board yesterday morning." Sienna's face drains of all color. She looks at Raymond, her hand trembling so badly she has to drop her designer bag onto the floor. "Maggie," Sienna says, her voice losing its polished, clinical sweetness, dropping into a desperate, sharp register. "Let's be reasonable. If the company goes under, you lose everything too. The house, your security. It's all tied to the survival of Cole & Co." I look at her. I look at the white gold diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. "I've spent 30 years sleeping in a house with a leaking heater, Sienna," I say, my voice steady and cold. "I know how to survive the cold, but I don't think you do." The silence that settles over our kitchen is thick and heavy, punctuated only by the slow, rhythmic drip, drip, drip of the red-dyed heating oil weeping onto the concrete floor of the basement below us. Raymond sits down heavily on one of the leather bar stools, his posture completely collapsing. His bespoke charcoal suit looks suddenly oversized, his silver hair messy and unkempt. The executive veneer has been stripped away, leaving only the tired, desperate carpenter he was 30 years ago, before the vanity took him. "You can't do this, Maggie," he stammers, his voice a ragged whisper. "I built this company. You can't just take it." "I didn't take it, Raymond," I say quietly, setting my empty mug on the counter. "You spent 30 years treating me like a ghost, completely forgetting that the ghost is the one who keeps the keys. When you use the Cole & Company commercial line of credit to fund Larchmont Holdings, you legally bound the Gold Coast condominium to the original 1994 partnership." Sienna steps forward, her face tight with panic, her hand clutching her throat. The white gold diamond tennis bracelet glitters in the kitchen light. "The penthouse lease is in my name. You can't touch my home." The lease was signed by Larchmont Holdings, which is now a bankrupt, fraudulent shell, I say, looking directly into her cold eyes. Because the funds used to purchase that property were legally disputed, the title has reverted to the original partnership under my sole administrative control. I filed the formal eviction notice with the Cook County Sheriff's Office this morning. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from my condominium, Sienna. Sienna looks at Raymond, waiting for him to fight, to yell, to assert his authority. But Raymond only stares at the polished quartz countertop, his chest heaving under his suit. He has no cards left to play. "What about my job, Mom?" Becca asks, her voice small, trembling like a child's. "What about my career?" I look at our daughter. The cream silk blouse I ironed for her yesterday is wrinkled, the collar sagging. The anger I felt has dissolved, leaving only a quiet, maternal sadness. I sold the Cole & Company showroom inventory and the warehouse property to Midwest Design Collective yesterday afternoon, Becca, I say softly. The proceeds from the sale have been placed into a restricted professional trust in your name. It will pay for your licensing and your living expenses, but the trust only activates if you complete your hours under an independent, certified design firm. You cannot work for your father. He has no firm left. Becca looks down at her shoes, a single heavy tear spilling over her cheek and splashing onto the white tile floor. She nods, a silent, painful surrender to the truth. "And the house?" Raymond whispers, his voice cracked and hollow. "What about our home?" "The house is yours, Raymond," I say, picking up my car keys and my faded canvas tote bag from the island. "I am signing my share of the deed over to you as part of our divorce settlement. I have no desire to live here anymore." I walk toward the front door, my boots clicking softly against the tile. Raymond doesn't stand up. He doesn't try to stop me. He sits on his expensive leather stool in his cold white kitchen, staring at the green filing cabinets of his past. "The heating oil tank in the basement is still leaking, Raymond," I say, pausing at the threshold. "Silas Thorne said it must be replaced by Monday before the ground freezes. It will cost $10,000. I suggest you find a bucket." I step out of the house. The freezing drizzle has finally cleared, replaced by a pale, clean winter sun that cuts through the fog, making the wet pine needles sparkle like diamonds. I climb into my 10-year-old station wagon. On the passenger seat sits the original deed to the Gold Coast penthouse, signed in my name. I turn the key in the ignition. The engine starts with a loud, familiar rumble, the brass key around my neck clinking softly against the steering column. I look back at the White House in my rearview mirror. It looks cold, stark, and empty against the gray winter sky. I shift into drive and press the gas, leaving the cold house and the broken men behind me, heading toward a terrace that finally belongs to the woman who paid for it.